This is Nightly Business Report with Bill Griffith and Sue Herrera.
Back to basics. Stocks rose on optimism over trade between the United States and China, even as the impeachment inquiry divides Washington. Up in vape. Pressure mounts on the e-cigarette industry, and investors wonder whether it's still a viable business. Sales surge. The housing market heats up, but it could be coming at a steep price. Those stories and much more tonight on Nightly Business Report for this Wednesday, September 25th. And we do bid you a good evening, everybody, and welcome. Sue is off tonight. Well, it was another day, another headline, and another big market response. At the open this morning, stocks continue to trade lower after yesterday's sell-off ahead of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's announcement about an impeachment inquiry. But later in the morning, President Trump made an offhand remark during meetings at the United Nations that a trade deal with China may come sooner rather than later. That's all it took. Stocks reversed course, and they headed higher once again. The industrial average closed up 162 points to 26,970. NASDAQ was up 83. The S&P added 18. But the fallout in Washington from the impeachment inquiry was still very much on the minds of investors. The president did call the inquiry a hoax and said that he supports transparency on whistleblower information and from the Democrats as well. Ylan Mui has more on the drama in D.C.
Democrats and Republicans are girding for battle on Capitol Hill as the impeachment inquiry divides Washington. This morning, the White House released notes of President Trump's July 25th phone call with the leader of Ukraine. In it, Trump said, "There's a lot of talk about Biden's son. A lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great." The Justice Department said that President Trump never spoke with Attorney General William Barr about Ukraine and that Barr has not communicated with Ukraine. But the DOJ said it did review the complaint from the whistleblower who raised concerns about the president's conversation with a foreign leader and that it determined the complaint did not need to be sent to Congress. Democrats said these new details only strengthen their resolve to move forward with an impeachment inquiry.
What those notes reflect is a classic mafia-like shakedown of a foreign leader.
Some Republicans were ruffled as well. There's bipartisan pressure on the White House to release more information, and Utah Senator Mitt Romney described the call as deeply troubling.
I did read the transcript. It remains troubling in the extreme. It's deeply troubling.
Today, Democratic leadership said there's no set timeline for action, but they want to move expeditiously. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Ylan Mui in Washington.
Now, many Washington policy analysts do say the impeachment inquiry could endanger the ratification of trade initiatives, including the new NAFTA, or USMCA as it's known. The accord makes changes to the trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. But Democratic leaders today insisted the inquiry will not be a distraction. They are committed to working on that deal. Speaking of trade, the U.S. and Japan today announced a limited agreement. The pact will open Japanese markets to American farm goods, and it cuts American tariffs on Japanese turbines, bicycles, and other goods. The deal was announced when President Trump met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly today. Now, while chief executives follow trade talks very closely, there's another country where they see the potential for a big opportunity. That's India. And today, the leaders of some of America's biggest companies met with India's prime minister. Seema Modi reports tonight from New York City.
American companies are looking to expand their operations in India, a growing emerging market with 1.3 billion people. The opportunity to expand into India is so great that top executives, including JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, and IBM CEO Ginni Rometty met for 2 hours at a private meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But just as the opportunities are great, so are the challenges. CEOs used the meeting to voice their concerns.
I thought it was a really good conversation. I mean, you had some of the biggest CEOs in America. Prime Minister gave almost 2 hours of time and listened to a lot of the ideas as well as issues. And I think people were quite candid about some of the things that they think India needs to do. And he was very receptive to hear those.
The timing of the meeting comes as India's economy has slowed to a 6-year low and unemployment has risen sharply. According to sources, in the meeting, Modi tried to calm concerns about the slowdown, referencing tax cuts unveiled last week that he says will have a positive impact on the economy.
I think the Prime Minister, when he walked in, we had the CEOs a bit skeptical with the economy slowing down, and he lifted the mood, and you could see they were excited, positive, and willing to invest more in the country.
But experts say there are other roadblocks, like obtaining construction permits and acquiring land in India. And a recent e-commerce ruling has challenged Walmart and Amazon's growth in the country. But executives remain hopeful that this ruling will be relaxed in the near future. What did you discuss with Modi today?
We had a great discussion, and I'm glad that we came to the meeting. We've got a tremendous opportunity in India, and it's great to have this kind of dialogue.
You think he'll change the e-commerce ruling to help you guys grow there?
Wait and see.
Executives also pushed Modi to get a trade deal signed with the U.S.
My thinking is just wait and watch. These are the two economies which are growing together, and a trade deal will happen.
Any progress made on trade would be welcomed by U.S. businesses that are trying to grow their market share in India. For Nightly Business Report, Seema Modi, New York.
Meanwhile, the housing market here in the U.S. is definitely reheating. We got more evidence of that today from a new report that showed a surprise surge in newly built homes in August. But it didn't come cheap. Diana Olick explains.
New home sales jumped to the second highest level in over a decade in August as buyers took advantage of cratering mortgage rates. The average rate on the 30-year fixed was well over 4% back in May, but had fallen to around 3.5% by August, when the contracts on those new homes were signed. Just one of the reasons for an upgrade of big builders Lennar, KB Home, and Toll Brothers by home building analyst Buck Horn.
Lower mortgage rates, sub 4% mortgage rates, were definitely enough of an incentive to go out and buy some houses, and that's what the data indicated, and that trend appeared to accelerate really into July and August.
But the action is still on the higher end. Just 1% of sales were for homes priced below $150,000, and just 9% were between $150,000 and $200,000. The biggest growth was in luxury. Sales of homes priced above $750,000 were up about 60% compared with a year ago.
The new entry level, the redefinition of it in a lot of markets starts at $300,000. And that's for a lot of households still kind of an aspirational type number to be able to reach.
The surge in sales also caused the supply of newly built homes to drop dramatically. And for the first time this year, supply is now lower than it was a year ago. Another red flag, falling mortgage rates. They're not falling anymore. In fact, they moved sharply higher this month and could keep going. That's already making that price premium for a sparkly new home even bigger. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
Boeing today announced a settlement in some of the lawsuits involving the victims of the 737 MAX crashes. They are separate from the millions of dollars the company has already agreed to pay out of a victims' compensation fund. It's all an attempt by Boeing executives to try and just move forward. Here's Phil LeBeau.
Nearly a year after a Boeing 737 MAX plunged into the Java Sea, killing 189 people, Boeing has settled some of the lawsuits involving that crash. Reuters reports the families of each victim will receive at least $1.2 million. Boeing has not commented on the agreements. They come as Boeing faces dozens of lawsuits involving two 737 MAX crashes. While it could take months, even years, to resolve all those cases, Boeing is also offering additional compensation to the families of victims. Each is eligible for approximately $144,000. So Boeing could pay just under $50 million, and families would retain the right to sue the company. Ken Feinberg, who oversaw the 9/11 Victim Fund, says in the Boeing case, families are emotional and weighing their options.
What we're trying to do with these families and the lawyers representing these families in all of these foreign countries is explain to them there really are no hidden agendas here. We're trying to get the money out. Boeing is pushing to get this money out separate from the litigation. There's a deadline of December 31st.
Meanwhile, Boeing is considering changes to the way it designs and builds airplanes, so there is a greater focus on safety and oversight. All of this comes as Boeing CEO says the 737 MAX could be back in service by the end of the year, meaning we could be just a few weeks away from the FAA recertifying and deeming the MAX safe to fly. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Still ahead, a road trip in an RV.
$3 billion worth of RV sales are expected over 3 days here at the annual event where dealers buy new models. This industry has been slumping in recent years, but CEOs of the biggest companies say they're very optimistic about the future. I'm Frank Holland. I'll tell you why coming up on Nightly Business Report.
The average cost of employer-provided health coverage has now hit a record, surpassing $20,000 a year for a family plan. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, on average, employers cover about 70% of that cost. Employees pay the rest. Right now, deductibles are rising faster than premiums, and costs for health care overall are rising faster than wages. And that has pushed an increasing number of American workers into less expensive plans that don't cover as much, or they have simply chosen not to enroll at all. Well, there was a lot of news in the e-cigarette business today. While tobacco executives and the FDA commissioner were on Capitol Hill testifying about regulations and health issues, leading e-cigarette maker Juul announced a shakeup, and a 10th death tied to vaping was also announced. Rahel Solomon has more.
For Juul, the biggest e-cigarette company in the U.S., Wednesday marked a change at the very top. CEO Kevin Burns was stepping down. Longtime Altria executive Casey Crossweight is stepping in as its new chief executive, effective immediately. Juul has come under increasing scrutiny by lawmakers and critics for fueling the underage vaping epidemic.
We saw a 78% increase last year and then about another 30% increase this year on top of that of kids using e-cigarettes. And that's a crisis born of the access and appeal that these products have to kids.
At a hearing on Capitol Hill Wednesday, Altria CEO pushed back on accusations that Juul alone fueled what some, like the governor of Massachusetts this week, called a public health emergency.
The increase started before Juul was a very significant product in the market. As the category started to grow rapidly, driven by Juul, the youth issue became a very significant issue that I think appropriately caught the focus of the FDA. And I think Juul is committed to building on the actions they've already taken to drive down youth use of e-vapor.
In a first-of-its-kind ban, Massachusetts announced Tuesday it was banning all vaping products for 4 months. Illinois is also considering a ban. The White House has said it's planning to ban the products until they can be reviewed further. Wednesday, Juul announced it would stop advertising its products and would not lobby the White House administration as it considers that ban.
They, along with others in the industry, are going to have to ultimately reverse this increase of youth usage of e-vapor products. I think they've taken a number of actions already, and I have no doubt that their new CEO will help them decide what additional actions need to be taken.
But former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb warns pulling the product off shelves completely could create another issue.
It's going to increase the market for the illegal product.
The CDC representative saying they have more than 100 people investigating the issue, but warned it will take a substantial amount of time before a cause is known. Altria and Philip Morris also announced today they were ending merger talks. Altria bought a 35% stake in Juul last year, and analysts pointed to Juul as a potential reason the merger talks ended. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Rahel Solomon.
And joining us now to talk about the future of this fast-growing industry and how likely it is to be regulated, we welcome the man you just saw in that package, former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Dr. Gottlieb, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks.
It occurs to me that you can't regulate a product until you understand what its purpose is. Are vaping products simply a smoking cessation system, or is it just another way to smoke?
Well, probably both. I mean, they could be a product that helps currently addicted adult smokers transition off of combustible tobacco. There are also products that are helping kids and some adults transition on to nicotine Some of those adults might have gone to smoking and instead of choosing to vape instead. But we know that kids are being initiated on nicotine through e-cigarettes that wouldn't have smoked. We've stigmatized smoking in this country, and so a lot of these kids who are becoming addicted to nicotine through these vaping products wouldn't have turned to cigarettes but for the fact that they now have a nicotine addiction.
And what role does THC, the marijuana derivative, play in all of this? I mean, there's a feeling that the sort of the counterfeit vaping material that has been out there that's maybe causing this lung disease and some of the deaths may involve THC. Does that get complicated since marijuana is not legal federally?
Well, I think we need to be careful to distinguish two problems. One is the crisis of an epidemic of teen vaping of e-cigarettes, and now these acute lung injuries, which seem to be driven by counterfeit products and illegal products that either contain THC or CBD for that matter. And
Right.
THC and CBD do fall into a regulatory no man's land. It's not clear who's regulating those vaping products right now. And one of the things that we saw this past summer was the launch of some national brands of vaporizing hardware that was being marketed purposely and deliberately for vaping THC and CBD. So that popularized the usage of those compounds. But those CBD and THC oils that are being vaped in those products, those tend to be a mom and pop business that are being produced under all kinds of different standards, sometimes with what we know now are dangerous oils in them that cause these lung injuries.
Walmart has now stopped selling vaping products. Massachusetts has announced a temporary ban on selling vaping products, in part because of the lung disease and the deaths. Do you find it ironic that they're banning those products when they still sell regular cigarettes?
Well, it certainly is, and I think that a lot of the adults who potentially were using these vaping products might now, some of them who have a nicotine addiction, are going to transition on to combustible tobacco. And while these vaping products are not safe, we do believe they're less harmful than combusting tobacco, lighting a cigarette on fire. Look, I think we need to be very deliberate about the steps that we take, and I think banning the vaping products is probably going to exacerbate the black market for the illegal vaping products if we ban illegal vaping products, and could stretch some of these acute lung injuries that we're seeing if, in fact, many of those injuries are the result of illegal products entering the market.
You know, today with all of the talk about the regulations, the bans, and all that's going on around this industry, one prominent professor of public health policy said that we might be looking at the beginning of the end of the vaping industry, even as Juul is still valued at about $40 billion. What do you say?
Well, look, I think this is an industry in trouble right now, and I think had they acted more responsibly when the issues around the youth epidemic first arose in 2018 when we first got that data, and didn't push back on some of the measures that we were trying to take to restrict kids' access to these products, you wouldn't see so many people jumping on and willing to conflate these acute lung injuries with the legally sold products. Now, it may well be that the legally sold products are causing some of these lung injuries, but it does appear that the majority of the lung injuries are the result of illegal products, THC and CBD products, as well as perhaps some illegal nicotine products. These illegal products tend to have oils in them that are harmful to the lungs. The legally sold products tend to be water soluble. But I think the industry behaved so badly when they were faced with the first crisis that now that they're facing a second crisis, they're garnering very little consideration.
Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Elsewhere, Best Buy is betting on big growth over the next 5 years, and that's where we begin tonight's Market Focus. During its annual Investor Day, the electronics retailer announced a goal of $50 billion in annual revenue by 2025, thanks in part to a push into health services. It's also targeting $1 billion in cost cuts during that same time frame. Separately, the company's CEO addressed how the Best Buy is dealing with the U.S.-China trade war.
First, we're trying to figure out what will actually be on the list, what's excluded. Second, to your point, we're working closely with our vendors. We're bringing product in early. We're talking about mitigation strategies. You're continuing to see supply chains move. I think that what you're going to see here heading into holiday, it's actually going to be very hard to track directly through a perfect 10% or 25% tariff.
Best Buy shares were down a fraction today to 67.43. VF Corp, which is the maker of the North Face, Vans, and other apparel brands, also outlined its growth plans today, seeing double-digit earnings growth through 2024. It also expects to return about $10 billion to shareholders over that time frame through buybacks and dividends. Shares rose a fraction today to 87.02. And the FTC is suing the Match Group for allegedly using fake love interest ads to entice customers to pay for subscriptions for its dating site Match.com. The director of the FTC said today that the site conned people, as he said, knowing the ad messages were from scammers. Shares fell nearly 2% today to 71.44. And activist hedge fund Elliott Management sent a letter to Marathon Petroleum recommending that it break the company up into 3 separate entities. Elliott suggested that the energy company keep Marathon as its refinery business, but then split its Speedway gas station chain and its midstream operations into independent companies. Marathon shares rose about 8.5% on that news today to 60.15. So yes, the economy is solid but slowing, and some say the risk of recession is rising. But someone forgot to tell the RV industry, which some look to as an economic indicator. The theory is simple. When RV sales are doing well, the economy tends to follow. So we sent our Frank Holland to Elkhart, Indiana, where a large percentage of recreational vehicles are made.
A motorhome with a bedroom that can turn into a garage. It's one of the many new models here at the RV Open House in Elkhart, Indiana, where dealers are expected to buy $3 billion of inventory.
My personal opinion is that the American consumer is still pretty solid.
The CEO of Winnebago, Michael Happy, is optimistic about this consumer discretionary industry, despite projections that would have sales falling for a third straight year in 2020 after a record 2017. Thor CEO Bob Martin believes the industry is on the road to recovery.
Dealers' attitudes are great. There's no doom and gloom. They're very positive as they look to next year and even as they look to the fall of this year.
Sales of Airstream, Thor's higher-end, higher-margin product, are very close to those 2017 record numbers, according to the company. They believe it's a sign that the consumer economy is still very strong.
We look at millennials as probably the next big opportunity. It's a very large group. It's larger than the baby boomers. They're connected to social experience and being outdoors. And so for us, if we can just start talking to them now and bring them into our units, maybe the smaller units as they get started, they're less expensive. You know, they may not own a home, but they like their adventures.
Winnebago expects tariffs to negatively impact the company by tens of millions of dollars. But Happy says historically high consumer spending and consumer confidence numbers, as well as falling interest rates, are just what the industry needs.
I think part of our ascension in terms of number of units sold in the last 10 years has been because financing has been available in a very disciplined way, and it's been affordable. And so I think another quarter point drop certainly would be beneficial, but I think the industry is healthy.
Another bright spot for the sector, the number of households camping more than 3 times a year has increased 72% since 2014. In Elkhart, Indiana, Frank Holland, Nightly Business Report.
And coming up, advertisers are finding new ways to get your attention, and it's raking in the cash. If you want to work at McDonald's, you can now ask Alexa or Google Assistant for help. The so-called smart speakers now allow job seekers to start an application by simply using voice commands. McDonald's says it's the first direct employer to use those platforms in this way, and it allows the fast food chain to stand out in a tight labor market. It's also part of a broader effort by McDonald's to incorporate more technology into its operations. Speaking of which, as hiring goes high-tech, so does advertising. And the industry's innovative push was on full display during this year's Adweek conference in New York City. Julia Borston has more.
Billboards and radio spots may seem old-fashioned compared to Facebook and Instagram ads, but new technology is digitizing traditional formats and jump-starting growth.
Alexa, can you tell me about the new McDonald's skill?
happy too. With the explosion of home speakers, streaming music services such as Spotify and Pandora, as well as podcasts, the digital audio ad market grew to $2.3 billion last year, a 23% increase from the prior year.
Given that smart home devices are driving the growth in the digital audio environment right now, it makes a lot of sense that Amazon has moved forward with a digital audio product, given that they support Alexa, which is the largest smart home device currently on the market.
And now Amazon, the third largest ad giant, is using digital audio ads in its new ad-supported music service to drive that growth.
A lot of what has driven brands to look at digital audio advertising is the ability to target customers more specifically in a digital environment, but Pandora, Spotify rely largely on third-party data. Amazon has a vast amount of first-party data that they can use.
Meanwhile, outdoor advertisers are benefiting from new digital tools as well. While the overall ad market has grown just 4% a year over the past decade, digital billboards are responsible for 55% of that growth, now comprising a fifth of all outdoor ad revenue. One startup bringing billboards online is called AdQuick. It aggregates the inventory of billboards and the like from 1,000 media owners nationwide, including Clear Channel and Lamar, enabling buyers to target zip codes and measure the impact of the ads based on increases in web traffic from different locations. And the more traditional billboards are converted into digital displays, the more opportunity for brands to tap into the potential to swap out messaging and customize ads based on the zip code. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston.
Finally tonight, we learned that GM and the UAW are reportedly close to a tentative deal to end that strike, so that'll be a focus of tomorrow's market after today's gains. That is Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Bill Griffith. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.